So far, 2017 has been a strong year for American pork and beef exports. Through the first 9 months of the year, shipments of U.S. pork were on pace to set a new record. Beef and veal exports were only slightly behind the top set in 2011. The U.S. Department of Agriculture expects about 11% of the nation's beef and veal production will be exported this year, along with 22% of the country's pork output. The top destinations for both meats are typically in Mexico, Japan, Canada, and South Korea. We recently talked with Jessica Spreitzer from the U.S. Meat Export Federation to discuss those markets, along with emerging buyers in South America and the Southeast Asian or ASEAN region.
So 2017 has been a great year for both beef and pork. To start with beef, we're seeing just double-digit growth, especially in chilled beef exports. We're seeing growth across the board, but the main growth is coming in Japan, and then also strong growth in Korea and Taiwan, and some emerging growth in the ASEAN region as well. So our exports are up significantly over last year, up 9% through September. For pork, it's a similar story. We're seeing growth as well, but again, across the board, except for a little bit of the slowdown to China and Hong Kong, but the main increase is to Mexico, so that's really driving the volume increase there.
Why is Japan such a strong market for U.S. beef?
So Japan has seen increasing beef consumption this year after a little bit lower beef consumption levels for the last few years. But this year we're seeing a big growth in retail sales, but most of the growth is being driven by consumer food service. And so that's an area where the U.S. high quality product can really shine. We have a lot of established relationships with food service customers there. So we're seeing really strong growth in items like short plates that are going for the beef bowl restaurants, and then other items like more grilling type items or tongues going to yakiniku grilling style. So we're seeing growth across the board there.
Is there a danger in that market with the amount of market access, the benefit of market access that Australia has?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a worry in Japan because we are being left behind by our competitors on their duty levels. So the only competitor, the main competitor that has a free trade agreement right now with Japan is Australia. And through that, they do have preferential duty rates compared to the U.S. on both chilled and frozen beef. Mexico also has a free trade agreement, but they're a smaller supplier. Our worry is going forward with TPP now that the 11 remaining countries are moving ahead without the U.S. All of those benefits that the U.S. worked to negotiate will now go to these other countries. So our competitors like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Mexico will now all have preferential duty rates compared to the U.S.
Let's stay in Asia with South Korea, which has been a good market for both beef and pork. Why?
Yes, so we're seeing just increasing rates of consumption for both beef and pork in Korea. Their growth in consumption just for beef over the last 10 years is like 44%. So just skyrocketing growth. And they're becoming really big meat eaters. So there's a switch, and this has been more long-term, but it's a switch from rice and grains to more poultry, beef, and pork. So the U.S. is benefiting from that as one of the main suppliers, especially for chilled beef to Korea.
Specifically with pork to Mexico, Mexico has been an incredibly strong market for the U.S. Which cuts are doing well there?
So hams are the main cut that goes to Mexico, and Mexico is on pace to set a 6th record year for U.S. pork exports. So we've just seen just increasing volumes there and just huge growth. That is being driven by consumption that can't be met with growing production. So the U.S. has been filling that gap. And then also Mexico is a very important market for variety meats as well for pork.
Is the renegotiation or withdrawal of Nafta a legitimate threat for U.S. pork exports? Does Mexico have other options?
Yeah, so we really want to do no harm with where Nafta is right now for U.S. pork and also for beef. But the volumes going to Mexico compared to our total exports, it makes up a significant amount of volume. So we are worried about Mexico looking to diversify. They are doing that with, not just beef and pork, but also all of their agricultural products. So they are taking this as a threat. We want to assure them and also place the pressure here that we need to remind everyone how important Nafta really is for U.S. beef and pork exports so that we don't have any hiccups in our top volume market for U.S. pork.
Their options for other buyers or other suppliers would be who?
Well, they're working right now on a modernization of their free trade agreement with the EU, so that's something that could be a threat. Canada would be the other main supplier to them right now for pork. That's the top supplier after the U.S.
One of the disappointing markets for U.S. pork exports is China. Why is China down, and is there a way that U.S. exports can rebound there?
So with China, we have seen a slowdown this year, and it's not just from the U.S., it's with all suppliers, but of course, the EU is really dominated in China so far. That's because China's production is very cyclical, so production has increased again this year. The huge increase in volumes last year was when they were short on production. But even though the muscle cut volumes have slowed a little bit this year, we are seeing growth in variety meats still. So pork exports to China and Hong Kong for variety meats have been very strong, and they're higher than last year. And actually the value is increasing even more than the volume. So the value per head for each commercial hog slaughtered in the US is up to $6 just from variety meat exports to China and Hong Kong, and that's up a whole $1 from the same period last year.
In either pork or beef, what emerging markets do you think are noteworthy?
So to start with beef, South Africa has been a great market for U.S. beef exports so far this year. The market opened to U.S. beef last year, and since then it has become the second largest destination for U.S. exports of beef livers. And this has come at a time when Egypt, the top destination for beef livers, has slowed. So this has helped offset kind of the loss in Egypt with their currency issues and provided another outlet for those larger volumes of U.S. beef liver imports. So that's been really successful for us. And in addition, on beef, we're seeing growth in the ASEAN region as well. A lot of demand in the Philippines for high-quality U.S. beef in food service and retail, also demand in Indonesia and Vietnam. And then looking at Brazil is another new market. That's another market where we have opportunities on livers. But the main item that they demand is picanhas, which would be culottes. So we also have opportunities there for culottes and middle meats as well. And then shifting to the pork side, Colombia would be one of our main standout markets this year. That is one of the larger markets for U.S. pork exports, but growth has been huge this year. Also to Chile, where we've seen both on pace to set a new record for imports from the U.S. this year. And Colombian consumers are choosing to eat more and more pork. They're shifting to pork as an affordable protein. So as their consumption rapidly expands, they have a lot of product that needs to be filled with imports as their production can't keep pace. So we're really benefiting from that along with our FTA in Colombia.